Hello, we're going to install side-by-side Ubuntu 26.04 and Fedora Linux 44 workstation. So both will use the GNOME desktop. In the left half of the screen, we will do Ubuntu 26.04. On the right half of the screen, Fedora 44. Let's get the ISO files first. This is the file that we want for Ubuntu, resolute desktop amd64.iso, and for Fedora Workstation 44, this is the one. Fedora Workstation AMD x86-64, this file. I have started downloading the files. Let's see the relative speeds. The Ubuntu offering uses probably a CDN, 32 megabytes per second versus 2 megabytes per second. Now the speeds are reversed. So probably both are served via CDNs. Let's compare the checksums to make sure that we have downloaded the ISO files correctly. So Fedora Workstation, this is the checksum. It's SHA-256, starts with 541, ends with EBF. The command line is SHA-256 sum and then the name of the file, and it matches. Let's see the SHA-256 sum for the Ubuntu ISO, starts with 6C, ends with E1. And for AMD64, it's correct. So the ISO's sizes is 66.4 gigabytes for Ubuntu and 2.6 gigabytes for Fedora. And the Ubuntu larger ISO file was downloaded twice as fast. Let's create virtual machines. We're going to use QEMU KVM Virt Manager, Virtual Machine Manager. We're going to create two virtual machines at the same time. File, new virtual machine. In the left half, we'll do the Ubuntu, so ISO forward, browse, and resolute. And then let's do the same thing for Fedora, file, new virtual machine. We can't, because this dialog is modal. So it didn't detect the operating system. Let's see something new. So Ubuntu 25.10, okay. Forward. And we have 32 gigabytes of random access memory. Let's go with 8 gigabytes per each virtual machine. And then for CPU threads, vCPUs, we'll go with 8 vCPUs for each. So 8 gigabytes of random access memory, 8 vCPUs, approximately, forward. And very large disks. Ubuntu 26.04 without any dots. Customize, finish. Okay, and now hopefully we can create the virtual machine. No, we cannot. Let's see if we can start the virtual machine manager a second time. Open new window. We cannot. Okay, so let's see the settings. Theoretically, the defaults should be okay, but let's push our luck. Let's go with UEFI, which is most computers should be UEFI first, not BIOS first, and virtual machines should also be UEFI first. I'm not sure why Virtual Manager keeps defaulting to BIOS in the year 2026. Apply. Okay. Virt.io for the disk and for the network interface card, begin installation. And by enabling UEFI, we also have enabled secure boot, which means that the Ubuntu 26.04 ISO knows how to boot using UEFI secure boot, which is really important. Not many operating systems can boot from UEFI secure boot. Thank you for subscribing, joining, and helping this YouTube channel. And finally, we can create the second virtual machine for Fedora Workstation 44 ISO. Browse Fedora Workstation, choose volume, Fedora 42, forward 8, 8, forward 200, forward Fedora 44, customize, finish, and let's try to do the exact same thing. So UEFI, because it's more modern than BIOS and it's what everybody actually has on their hardware computers. People also do have UEFI with secure boot enabled by default on their hardware computers. And the rest of the settings are identical to the Ubuntu virtual machine. So Virt.io for fast network interface cards and storage. Begin installation. And thankfully, Fedora Workstation 44 also knows how to boot using secure boot BIOS. The default boot method will test the ISO as it were, so it does a checksum, which we already did, but the checksum in Fedora is extremely fast. It's under, I don't know, 5 seconds, so it's no problem if you do the check. I would actually recommend that you keep the defaults and actually do the check each time you install Fedora. Okay, so we're in similar places. We have booted both operating systems from the installation ISO. We're running in a live CD style mode. Let's see the actual size. How do we do that? Resize to VM like this. This way we're going to see the exact default resolution of these operating systems running in Virt Manager, QEMU, KVM, and also no scaling. So there's no stretching happening. Install Fedora. The graphical user interface installer should start also for Fedora 44. The installer wizard has started automatically for Ubuntu 26.04. Totally different installers, graphical user interface installers for both operating systems. The one of them provides defaults, so English language, while the other, Fedora Linux 44, tries to be smart and guess the probably possible better suited language based on, I don't know, IP addresses, etc. Next, I want the default keyboard, which is US English. Next. No accessibility. English US, thank you. Use wired connection, okay. Let's see the step that we're at in Fedora Linux 44. We're before partitioning the disk. Use entire disk, yes. Don't encrypt. And it just prefers BTRFS. We're going to keep the defaults this time. So use wired connection, install Ubuntu, interactive installation, default selections of applications, default, next. I don't need third-party software. I'm not sure what this checkbox does. I have traditionally never enabled it, but I still get to have my preferred media player, which is MPV, SM Player, YTDLP, work correctly. Next. Erase disk and install. No encryption. Okay, and that was for partitioning scheme. Let's look at Fedora 44. So we're using UEFI, so there's a /boot/EFI file system. /boot is ext4, and then two subvolumes btrfs for / and home. Erase data and install. Okay, in the meantime, in Ubuntu, we're going to create the first user, the user that has sudo powers. Computer name the same as the virtual machine. Ubuntu 26.04. The weakest password possible. Require my password to log in. I'm not going to use Active Directory, so just the defaults. And New York. And let's see the partitioning scheme. /boot/EFI is FAT32 of type UEFI for because we're using UEFI, not BIOS. And then / is ext4. Sounds okay. Okay, so Fedora 44 says that installing software 48%. This is something really wrong that I'm seeing right here, which is it's downloading packages. Ubuntu. I'm not sure why it would do that. Okay, so it has created VDA2 for the, I don't know. Yeah, for /ext4. And now the actual big part of the installer, which is the rsync from the ISO towards the towards / has started. The two operating systems are at similar places inside the installer. They're actually copying a ton of files from the live CD installation towards the virtual disk. Fedora is now installing the bootloader. So Fedora did not ask for the user to be created before actually installing to the disk. That's why the installer wizard is a bit more advanced in time, Fedora Linux versus Ubuntu. But then at some point after probably the computer is restarted. Before logging into GNOME for the first time, we're going to create the first Linux user in a what is called OEM setup experience. Yeah, something is not that great because probably the reporting of progress is not perfect in the Fedora Linux 44 installer, because it cannot possibly be installing the bootloader for, I don't know, for 5 minutes. So it's probably doing something else than installing the bootloader, but it just didn't update the progress. And now we're at finalization. Okay, so Ubuntu finished the big rsync. Now it's downloading the metadata, available binary packages in the repositories. Now it's doing the bootloader. It's going to be pretty close. And Ubuntu has already created the user, so the possibility here should be to restart in the freshly installed system. So the button to exit to the live desktop should be very secondary or hidden or something. The big button here should be restart, this option, reboot into your newly installed system. The fact that I don't see a button to reboot is a bug. Okay, and the Ubuntu installer has finished, so the big button, the emphasized one, should be restart now. Continue testing, which is continue with the live CD sessions, should be just secondary or hidden, or maybe people can just close the wizard. So restart now once, and restart now twice. Okay, it says that we should remove the installation medium, which Virtual Manager does automatically. I'm going to press enter. We're at UEFI, both operating systems. They both show the UEFI image. And Fedora has started the OEM experience. So I want English next. I want English US next. I'm not sure what this thing is. ABR sounds something that we should enable. Next. Time zone. New York. Next. Third-party repositories, yes, please, because Fedora by default cannot ship certain software, and I'm not exactly sure what we get extra, but we probably want to get the extra things. Let's see what external sources is. Oh. Fedora docs. What is Fedora docs? So there's a binary package RPM, Fedora -workstation -repositories. We get FlatHub unfiltered, which is a good decision. Everything from FlatHub for Fedora 44. We get Google Chrome, why not? We get PyCharm, why not? We get from RPM Fusion NVIDIA binary driver, great. And from the same place, the Steam. But we don't get the extra goodies from RPM Fusion. which is the audio and video encoders and decoders, which we'll need to do manually. Okay, so we have enabled this. This gets us at least access to what we saw previously, so Google Chrome and the entire FlatHub. Next, username. Enterprise login is probably for logging into your Active Directory domain or a similar domain. Password. Next. Start using Fedora Linux. Let's see what's happening. So it has created the user administrator, the one that I have specified, and then it has logged into GNOME shell as that user for the first time, hopefully. Let's log in into Ubuntu 26.04 also. Okay, so both operating systems have been installed, have created a local Linux user account named administrator, have logged into GNOME shell as the user administrator for the very first time. We're being shown a first run wizard in both operating systems. So let's see them side by side. Get an overview, shows all apps and windows. Press the Windows key. Yeah, the Windows key, unfortunately, is not captured just by the operating system inside the virtual machine. Okay, let's see what Ubuntu shows us in the first run wizard. So these are settings related to Ubuntu, not to GNOME. Help improve by sharing the system data. I'm not sure what that does. No location services, no automatic problem reporting. Why not? So this part I have seen on Fedora. Make Ubuntu yours. I'm going to keep the defaults. There's an app center, which is centered around Snap Store, as far as I know. And that's it. Okay, powerful search. If you're inside the overview, you can just type, which is this place probably. Workspaces, which is virtual desktops. I don't use those. Swipe, I don't have a touchpad. No touchpad. That's it. See the help app. Okay, let's do the same thing again from the main menu of the viewer for Virt Manager. View resize to VM. Make sure nothing is scaled. And let's compare a bit the default look. The icons in the system tray, whatever, the main panel, are, I don't know, 2 pixels versus 1 pixel. I'm not sure which is better. I'm not sure if the size is a bit different. Probably the Ubuntu icons are a bit smaller. But this shutdown icon doesn't really look great. It's very, very pixelated. Okay, and then the top font with the date is bold in Fedora and not bold in Ubuntu. Also different fonts. These are probably Ubuntu style fonts. Okay. And then we can go to the overview probably. And Fedora is showing something similar to a main panel, only where you're inside the overview, whereas Ubuntu shows you something similar to a main panel with icons all of the time. And there's also desktop icon for the home directory. Let's see what applications are pinned by default. There's a web browser, Firefox, which is probably, let's guess, this guy is probably RPM. And this guy is probably Snap. The Firefox Snap in Ubuntu works correctly, and it worked correctly in the last two releases. So it worked correctly in Ubuntu 25.10 and in 25.04, and will probably work correctly in 26.04. There's no reason to uninstall it because it's a snap. It just works correctly. Fedora offers a default toolbar with bookmarks in Fedora in Firefox, and it did this for the last 26 years at least. In the year 2000, the Mozilla suite still had this bookmarks toolbar, which I immediately removed because I don't need such a thing. Okay. Let's see, help about Firefox. Doesn't mention it being non-RPM, so being probably a Flatpak. Whereas on Ubuntu, it does say that it's a snap package. I'm not sure why the about boxes are different. One says Firefox browser and the other one says Firefox. I'm not sure what's happening here. And the spacing is different. Okay, fonts look okay, but I'm not sure why Mozilla insists with their fonts that are not Arial-like, not sans serif, the sans serif type of fonts that I know. So, for instance, this M doesn't have two vertical bars. Okay. Let's continue with other applications. Let's see what's pinned. So there's the file manager, which is files, which is probably Nautilus. They look similar enough. The default icon size is different in the list view for the home directory. The icon theme is different. Yeah, so the fact that Ubuntu uses a different icon theme than the default GNOME one is at least intriguing to me. Why would they do such a thing? So different fonts and different icons. From the desired defaults of the GNOME community. So the GNOME community has some desired defaults and they're not present on Ubuntu. Okay, let's see some more pinned apps. There's an app store. So this is probably the Ubuntu App Center, which is centered around the Snap Store. And it does have a update manager for updating your Ubuntu dev packages, which we can see here somewhere. No, these are just snap package updates. Okay, let's go update all. Enable third-party software repositories. We already enabled those. Why would we enable them a second time in Fedora 44? So during the installer wizard, we were asked if we want to enable those 4 extra software sources, which we agreed. And now we're being asked again. I'm not exactly sure why. And it's the same list. So FlatHub Unfiltered, Google Chrome, PyCharm, NVIDIA, and Steam. Enable. So this is a bug, in my opinion. Why would it ask twice the same question? Okay, let's see if we can update the operating system in graphical user interface mode. What are these? These are the past updates. Okay. Secure boot signature database configuration update. System updates. So probably many RPM packages are grouped together because they're not really graphical user interface apps as system updates. And then for graphical user interface apps, calculator, calendar, camera, connections, files, etc. Let's actually perform all of these updates. How do we do that? This guy. And this guy. Restart now. I'm not sure if the RPM update experience will be during the boot. Might be. So there's 2 ways of installing RPM packages, either while the operating system is running or apply them in a batch, maybe in a transaction style experience while the reboot takes place. Let's go back to the App Store and make sure that we have installed all of the possible updates. So this is probably the GNOME application, GNOME software. So nothing actually happened, maybe just the firmware update, whatever the update for the UEFI. I thought those two can be combined, so both installing the RPM package updates and installing the additional UEFI digital signature updates can be done with just a single reboot. Okay, so this is the part starting offline transaction. This will take a while. So the idea here is that many important updates will actually require a reboot. So in this case, there was updates for the firmware for UEFI, secure boot digital signatures. Maybe there was an update for very low level parts like the Linux kernel or Mesa or other graphics low level RPM packages, which actually do require a reboot in order to apply them. So if you're still rebooting your computer in order to have the computer apply updates perfectly, why not install the updates while the computer is restarting? And while you're doing that, maybe you can actually have it be transactional. So you go start transaction, install a ton of RPMs, and then either commit the transaction or roll back. And probably the fact that Fedora in this case uses BTRFS might help a lot with the possibility of undoing a transaction, so for rolling back. Okay, so let's try to find out a way to install the updates using graphical user interface apps in Ubuntu. Let's go ask on the internet. How do we do that? I asked Google, and the answer is not that great. It tells me how to install a deb package, doesn't tell me how to update the system, the part of the Ubuntu 26.04 system that consists in deb packages, as compared to updating the part of the operating system that's composed from snap packages. And then it tells us that maybe there's an application named update-manager software updater. Let's see if that's the case. Software updater, this guy. Okay, we can log into Fedora. Okay, so the software updater says that there's 31 system components, so deb packages which are not actually graphical user interface applications. Let's install now. I'm not exactly sure why the App Center would not have an easy way to trigger the software updater. Or, in my opinion, when you start the App Center should ask the software updater, hey, how many updates are available? And then provide in here a badge saying 37 deb packages can be updated with a button. And when you click that button, it should start software updater. At least this is the level of support for deb packages that I would expect from the main Ubuntu graphical user interface app store. It didn't ask to reboot. That's very interesting. Maybe no low-level packages have been installed, but then a ton of GNOME packages have been installed, including the icon theme. So it totally does require a reboot. Let's actually do that. Okay, so the Ubuntu updates have finished installing. I have rebooted the computer, and now I'm greeted again with the first run wizard, which is a bug, but a different one. So it's definitely different options here. But still, a first run wizard is a first run wizard. So it's being run just once, the first time. So this is definitely a bug. Okay, let's see other pre-installed applications. Let's see if we have a text editor and a calculator. How do we find applications? Text editor and calculator. Where is the calculator? I know, let's write. It was here, the first option. Okay. The two applications look similar in the sense that they're probably the same application. At least the calculator is identical, but then there's a different icon theme for Ubuntu than the icon theme that's default in GNOME. Different color scheme. Preferences. Okay, so preferences is not a modal dialog, but then it occupies part of the window for the calculator. Okay, and the theming for the widgets is very similar, with similar theming for this spinner and for the toggle box. But then again, different fonts and different color scheme. Okay, let's see what application is this one. About text editor. It's the GNOME text editor. In the sense that it's not gedit. Okay, interesting experience. Let's see other default applications. Let's see if we have a terminal pre-installed. Of course we do. How could we not have such a thing? Terminal versus terminal. Yeah, I totally am not sure why would Ubuntu choose by default the GNOME shell desktop when they're immediately going to change the icon theme. Whereas the GNOME desktop, the GNOME community wants GNOME desktop to use the default icon theme. So Ubuntu goes against the wishes of the GNOME community here. About. Okay, so this is GNOME terminal. No, it's Ptaxis. Okay, I don't know enough, but probably Ptaxis is a GTK4 application and was for some time, quite some time. Whereas GNOME shell, GNOME terminal, I'm not sure if it has been ported to and released for GTK4 yet. Okay. What else is available out of the box? So the difference in installer sizes is important. There's 4 gigabytes of extra software in GNOME, in Ubuntu versus Fedora. So 6.4 gigabytes versus 2.6 gigabytes. So there's 4 extra gigabytes of software, hopefully in Ubuntu pre-installed. Maybe not really pre-installed, because when we installed, it gave us 2 options, which is a default installation, which is not minimal, but the default one, and then there was another checkbox value, maybe for additional applications, such as probably, I know, LibreOffice. LibreOffice is pre-installed on Fedora, but not pre-installed on Ubuntu. But Fedora doesn't have that checkbox option to prefer a more bare bones default installation versus a more complete one. And there's search results from the GNOME software application, which is the App Store. So if I write Libre and LibreOffice is not installed, probably it's going to offer me the option. So I can see immediately that it would make it easy to install the LibreWolf web browser if it's not already installed. Let's do such a thing. Let's search for Chromium and see what happens. Chromium. Okay, and it also lists the source, which is very important. But the listing is totally not okayish. So dl.flathub.org, I'm going to guess that it's a Flatpak package from FlatHub, but these guys, sourcefedoraproject.org and sourceregistry.fedoraproject.org, I'm not going to be sure which one is RPM and which one is Flatpak. And if it's a Fedora Flatpak, why would it be available? Because I didn't enable anywhere Fedora provided Flatpaks. I have only additionally enabled the Flatpak source for FlatHub. Let's see if this can be seen inside the GNOME software application. So we want the list of all of the Flatpak remotes. How do we do that? So Fedora Flatpaks is enabled by default, which in my opinion is a bug. So let's uncheck it. How do we do that? We can't. Why not? Is it marked as default? Why wouldn't I be able to uncheck this? So RPM packages, the Fedora RPM packages, firmware, a copper, FlatHub, the official RPM package repository from google.com, and 2 from RPM Fusion. Yeah, so I'm not sure what to say here. So it's going to offer 2 very, very similar Flatpak repositories almost by default, in the sense that, I know, let's guess that half of the people that install Fedora are going to enable the additional sources, which means that they'll have most of the applications available both from RPM and from Fedora Flatpak and from FlatHub. When we're talking about GNOME applications, web browsers, KDE applications, etc. So most of these are packaged both as RPM packages and as Fedora Flatpaks and in FlatHub. But now at least we know. So registry.fedoraproject.org is Fedora Flatpaks, and dl.flathub.org is FlatHub. But then what's the third one, the Fedora project one? Where was I? So in here I wrote Chromium. Okay, so it offered the two applications. There's a game and a web browser. And this is from Fedora Flatpaks. This is from FlatHub, and these two probably are the RPM. This thing, I have no clue what it is. Why wouldn't it say the source? Because there's just one possibility. So for the graphical user interface application that's available from two sources, it's going to say the source, is going to list source colon. Whereas if one package is available just from one source, it's not going to have this text, additional text, source colon, and then from where. So it's anyone's guess what this application actually is on Google Chromium. Where is it coming from? So long story short, we actually want the Chromium web browser from RPM. So let's click there. And it takes us to Fedora Flatpaks. So it's double lying to us. So I have specifically selected this guy from the GNOME shell overview search. And then it just started the App Store GNOME software with the application Chromium pre-selected here. And the fact that Fedora Flatpaks is preferred over everything else. So first of all, I totally don't want this remote, so I cannot remove it, but then it also is the default one. Yeah. This triplification of the same software offered from 3 different locations is not something that can be understood by people who don't really know Linux. So regular software users will just be puzzled and not know what's really happening here. About Chromium. Built from source Fedora release 44. Okay, let's do the exact same thing on Ubuntu. So App Store, not App Store. Let's see if we can search straight from the GNOME shell overview. So let's write in here Chromium, and the Ubuntu App Store App Center results are provided. But as we saw, App Center is only for Snap Store. So only the applications from Snap Store, only the updates from Snap Store, nothing related to deb packages or to Flatpak or to anything else. So Snap Store only. That's why it doesn't need to provide a list of sources for the application. So it's clear that this is the one that we want. So in the case of the Snap Store, there's this possibility of going both in the future and in the past. So there's channels, Snap channels, latest stable, and then there are future channels, latest candidate, beta, and edge. All three future channels have different versions there. And I have also seen some applications that have a previous stable channel. So you can also go back in time. Okay, let's see if the gallery of screenshots is the exact same. So Chromium web browser, just one screenshot, a extremely antique one, maybe from the year that the Google Chrome web browser came out, was invented, had the first stable public release. So this screenshot is totally newer. Okay, so this is a bug in the Chromium web browser upstream app data that's being shown at least for Fedora Linux RPM packages. Let's see if for the other sources it's the exact same screenshots. So the same screenshot for Fedora Flatpaks and also for FlatHub, which is extremely strange. How could an RPM application from Fedora and the same application from FlatHub, Flatpaks have the exact same screenshots? I'm not sure if that's actually technically possible. Okay, let's install and run. Okay, let's see what this checkbox does. So the open versus uninstall buttons. Let's open. So it says confinement strict, but then I'm not sure if the snap confinement is used or the Google Chrome Chromium sandbox. Okay, let's see how the Chromium web browser says that it's actually coming from snap packages. It says in here. So there's no Google Chrome official package in the Snap Store, but then there's very important apps in the Snap Store. The most important for me being VS Code. Let's see if there's something similar in the application store from Fedora, VS Code. Okay, there's Visual Studio Code, which is coming from FlatHub only. Okay. So it's the official VS Code build. So the official binaries, probably from one of the sources that Visual Studio Code, so Microsoft provides for Visual Studio Code official binaries, or such as the Ubuntu Debian repository, deb repository, or maybe the RPM repository, or maybe the Snapcraft, the Snap Store Snap package, and then that thing is being repackaged as a Flatpak, I'm going to guess. Let's see if we can get a idea of what's actually the secret sauce. So github.com/flathub/com.visualstudio.code. Okay. And what do we have here? So there should be a recipe. This guy. It's using the Electron base app, org free desktop SDK. And it's using Visual Studio Code deb package, code.deb. That's being unarchived, untarred. Okay, from where is it actually being downloaded? From Linux deb AMD 64 stable. So probably from the Ubuntu Debian official deb repository, or from Microsoft for Visual Studio Code. So that's a great source to take and then repackage as a Flatpak package. I'm not sure if the experience is complete, but I do know that the Visual Studio Code experience indeed is complete from the Snap Store. I haven't used the FlatHub version yet of Visual Studio Code to know if installing everything works correctly. Extensions, so VS Code extensions, and then all of the features that Visual Studio Code has. Okay. Yeah, and the classic limitations with Flatpaks, that you need to find out a way to start Visual Studio Code from the command line without actually going com.visualstudio.code space dot. So to open the current directory as a directory inside Visual Studio Code. And then how do you see the slash, the root directory? How do you spawn processes from outside the bubble wrap Flatpak enclosure? There's host spawn, Flatpak spawn -- host. Use the host shell. Flatpak spawn -- host bash. Yeah, it doesn't sound like the complete experience of Visual Studio Code. Maybe with all of these workarounds applied, you can get close to a great experience. I cannot, I don't know. Okay. So what other important applications are available in the Snap Store? There's a Firefox that again really does work correctly, and it's installed by default on Ubuntu and Kubuntu and other operating systems in the Ubuntu family. So let's look at the list of software that's pre-installed by default in Fedora. So again, Ubuntu has a radio button where you can select if you want a experience where you install less applications in Ubuntu 26.04 or where you install more applications. That radio button I didn't see in Fedora. That's why probably Fedora installs more applications out of the box. So we can see that Fedora comes with the virtualization software GNOME boxes. And with the suite of LibreOffice office tools. So there's a spreadsheet, calc, and Impress for presentations, and Writer for documents. Okay, there's also a utility graphical user interface application to write to USB sticks, ISO files mainly. Let's see the media applications. What are the options here? Okay, so let's search for, I don't know, video. Yeah, I cannot prove that there's any video player installed by default, but again, I have selected from the radio button to install less applications in Ubuntu 26.04. No audio player, no music player. Okay, what application is this one? About video player. Website. It's the application Showtime. Okay, I haven't used the application. I don't know what's it about. Okay, so this would be it for the graphical user interface applications that come pre-installed on Fedora 42 workstation versus Ubuntu 26.04, but with the specification that I have selected to install less software on Ubuntu 26.04. Except from that, there's also a possibility of installing additional software. As we saw on Fedora, we have more sources of applications. On Ubuntu, we have two. So there's in Ubuntu 26.04, the sources being the official deb Ubuntu repositories plus the Snap Store. Whereas on Fedora Workstation, we have official Fedora RPM packages. Then we have Fedora Flatpaks, and then FlatHub, the entirety of FlatHub, Flatpak packages. And then there's some additions. There's support for NVIDIA binary drivers and PyCharm and the game store Steam. And then there's support for H.265.4 from Cisco. Okay. And the only thing that remains in here to see, apart from graphical user interface applications and installing more applications, is the command line, the text user interface experience, which is probably similar to what you know from previous versions of the operating system. That means how to use, I know, bash, how to navigate the file system from the command line, the various text user interface applications that can be installed, how to manage binary packages from the command line with the Flatpak command line and DNF in Fedora, versus the snap command line and apt command line for Ubuntu. So this is it. Both releases Fedora 44 and Ubuntu 26.04 are important. Everything works great, and the UEFI secure boot works great out of the box. Thank you.